Hello, I'm Tia Graham, and you're listening to The Metro on 1019 WDET FM. In this hour, we'll take a deep dive look at GLP-1 culture. Much discussion has been had about GLP-1 medications in America. It was originally prescribed to patients with type 2 diabetes, but has become more popular over the last decade for its ability to help users lose weight. Today, the drug is in high demand. According to recent polling, the percentage of U.S. adults who are currently using GLP-1s doubled from 2024 to 2025. The craze is so intense that drug manufacturers have been selling alternative versions to satisfy demand. Those versions are not FDA approved. Over the last 3 years, obesity rates in the U.S. have been on the decline. So, just how impactful has the drug been for people who struggle with obesity? And what does our swift adoption of the drug to lose weight say about what we value? The Metro's Carey Jr. explores some of these ideas with Professor Randy Seeley. He is the director of the Michigan Nutrition Obesity Research Center at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. We should note that Seeley is a paid consultant to pharmaceutical companies like Lilly and Novo. They manufacture drugs like Zepbound, Mounjaro, and Ozempic. Here's that conversation.
Okay, Professor Seeley. So GLP-1s are not new. They've been around for a couple decades to help people with type 2 diabetes, as I'm sure you know. But they are experiencing a resurgence right now. So can you first talk about where we are with GLP-1 development and what we expect to be kind of the next steps?
Like you said, we treat this as all a new phenomenon, but the reality is that these drugs have been used for 20 years. The difference now, we're using them specifically for weight loss, even in patients who don't have type 2 diabetes. And that's made a big difference, right, in terms of the number of people who are taking them and the number of people who might benefit from these particular drugs. The most important thing that's going to happen right now, right, is the availability of oral versions of these medicines. So right now, most people are taking them as an injection, usually once a week. But now there's a daily oral pill, right, that can be used as a GLP-1 agonist as well.
What is the necessary criteria for someone to be prescribed a GLP-1 for weight loss?
In general, the label says you should have a BMI over 30, right? And I think everybody in your audience knows, right, BMI is not a perfect measure, right, of whether you really have weight issues, right? So if you were a big, strong linebacker for the Lions, you may very well have a BMI that is over 30, but that's not because you have additional adipose tissue, right? It's because you have so much muscle. And that's different, right, than people. So again, these criteria, right, vary from place to place. So some places you have to have a BMI over 30, and then other comorbid factors, right, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, sleep apnea, other kinds of things. And sometimes they'll cover it for just obesity. It just really depends on the situation you find yourself.
If I understand this correctly, this is prescribed for weight loss in an effort to help with a person's overall health, correct?
Well, that is certainly the intention, right, of the drugs, right, is to make people healthier. Lots of people are using them for different reasons. And I think everybody comes to this with their own set of issues about what it is, how they feel about their weight and what it is that they want to do about it. What is quite clear, right, is that the use of these drugs not only helps people lose weight, but to improve a variety of other health conditions. So, for instance, in people with cardiovascular disease, their risk of a stroke or a heart attack goes down by about 20% when you take these drugs. And that's true across the class. And if you have kidney problems, right? So kidney disease, right? Again, these drugs are now being more aggressively used for patients with kidney disease to try to prevent their kidneys from getting worse. So we aren't at the end of this yet, right? There are going to be more things, right, that we're trying to find out about when and where to use these drugs. A recent example of a failure was it was believed that these drugs might be neuroprotective. That is, maybe it will help people with Alzheimer's disease. Large trial run by Novo Nordisk did not find evidence, right, that these drugs actually improved Alzheimer's disease. So I think we're in an interesting phase here where there's a hypothesis about these drugs treating almost everything. And what I think we're going to find out in the future, right, is that some of those are true, right? Some of these other diseases do get adequately treated by GLP-1s and some don't.
If the main goal is to improve someone's health, why is BMI the main criteria to get a prescription and not any of the health risks you listed?
Well, I think this goes to, how we do this in the US in general, right? Physicians have very wide license to use approved drugs for unapproved purposes. That is, things that were not tested and are on the label, right? That's approved by the FDA. They have very wide breadth to be able to use them how they think is best for their patients. But the problem, obviously, right, is it's not just a conversation between the patient and their doctor, right? Because there's a payer that's in here too, right? So the question is always, again, what your insurance coverage says about what it is that's appropriate. So whatever the societies, the various professional studies say about when to use these drugs, they're being used in a wide variety of ways, some productive and some probably not so productive.
It's done to leave whether to prescribe the drug up to the doctor's discretion, which then allows for them to better understand other potential uses for it.
That's right. Yeah, right. So one of the things that's going to happen in the medical system is that we're going to find all sorts of interesting avenues about where these drugs are helpful and sometimes where they're not. And we're going to have to make some guesses, educated guesses about what to do. As an example, if you were somebody who were on these drugs, successfully lost weight, and then were diagnosed with cancer, right? Should you come off of the drug? Right? These drugs interact with your immune system in some important ways, depending on what the nature of the tumor is and the nature of the treatment for that tumor. You might have to come off, but when you come off, maybe that increased weight will actually produce you at increased risk for recurrence of that cancer. So we're just going to be dealing with these kinds of issues over and over and over again in the system, and we're going to have to rely on doctors' good judgments, right, to be able to figure out how to use and when to use these drugs.
You're listening to The Metro on 1019 WDET. I'm Kerry Jr. II. My guest is Randy Seeley. He is the director of the Michigan Nutrition Obesity Research Center at the University of Michigan. He is also a paid consultant to the pharmaceutical companies Lilly and Novo. We are discussing the impacts of GLP-1 drugs and why they are a popular weight loss tool. Could we talk about some of the concrete risks that GLP-1s present when someone has them?
Yeah, so the most prevalent problem with using these drugs is nausea and vomiting. So when people start these drugs, we start them at very low doses, and they slowly ramp up. And the reason we do that is because these drugs will cause GI problems if you start them at too high a dose. Now, for some patients, they still get problems, even when you try to start low and go slow. But most patients, right, will tolerate out. That is, the GI symptoms will slowly go away, and what they will feel, right, is the ability of the drug to help them control their appetite and to lose weight independent of that. And I think what patients need to know is that you don't have to go fast, right? On the label, right, is a prescription for how fast you should move from one dose to the other. But that is what was based on a clinical trial, right, that the FDA allowed them to use. I think for most physicians using these drugs know that if we go slower, right, it would be less likely for you to have these GI side effects. It took most people years to gain the extra weight. It's okay if it takes 2 years to have it come off. And the thing about that weight loss is it comes with people being less hungry, right? The magic sauce here, right, is that if I taped your mouth shut, you'd lose weight, but you'd be hungrier because of it. Here, what happens is that people are less hungry even though they're losing weight, right? The drugs shift your brain into believing, right, that the weight you should be is now lower than it was before. And so then the natural version of your biology is that you're less hungry, right? You can burn more calories and lose that weight in a way that's consistent with your biology. What most people are doing, right, is trying to lose weight by white knuckling it, right? I am going to count my calories. I am going to get on the Stairmaster, whatever it is I'm going to do to try to create a discrepancy between how much I'm consuming and how much I'm burning. But that comes at a cost. And that cost is that your brain is going to tell you that you're hungry, right? You're losing weight in a way that's inconsistent with the biology, as opposed to what these drugs do is give you a biological burst, right, that allows you to be able to lose weight without fighting your biology every day.
And what about people with eating disorders where they're fighting other mental struggles with their relationship to food.
So I think, again, this falls into the area of places that we should be careful about where we go. There is no evidence, right, that these drugs make eating disorders worse, but I think that's likely to be a patient-by-patient issue, right? So if patients with existing eating disorders are going to take this, they should tread lightly, right? They should go slow, right, and consult with their physician about whether, in fact, it's helping them or it's causing other problems, right? I don't know there's any other way around this, right, than being able to work with your doctor, right, to figure out what it is that's going to make sense for you.
When people are on these drugs, are they expected to also adopt healthy lifestyle practices, diet, exercise?
Anytime, right, an obesity medicine specialist is trying to deal with a new patient, they're trying to get an accurate weight history. When and how did you get to the place you are? Then they're trying to improve their behavioral and environmental circumstance. Some of the patients, it's like trying to get their sleep right. So again, for some patients, right, if you get their sleep hygiene better so that they're going to bed at the same time and getting up at the same time and getting full night's rest, sometimes that will result in weight loss. Sometimes for some patients, that is sufficient to drive a lot of weight loss, but that's a tiny percentage, right, of the patient. So we want to do all of the above, right? We want to make you healthier by having you eat a better diet. We want to make you healthier by getting you to move more. We want to invest in other kinds of behavioral things about the stress in your life, your sleep habits, all of those kinds of things. But what we know before we had these drugs is that even those efforts taken to maximal effect, right, will only improve the weight of a small number of patients on a permanent basis. Most patients will lose some weight and then gain it back over the subsequent years, right? And what we know about these drugs is people don't gain it back unless they stop taking them.
So how are the lives of people who take GLP-1s changed?
So I think the biggest thing when you talk to patients who take these, right, is most of them are happy about losing weight, right? They've wanted to do that for some period of time. But what they also find, right, is that they have a lot less food noise. And that term refers to the idea when you are white knuckling it, when you are trying to lose weight against your biology, just by, again, willpower alone, your brain is going to tell you you're hungry. What that does is it means that all of the food stimuli in your environment are going to be very attractive, right? The Pizza Hut commercial, right, is going to get your attention, right? The Dunkin' Donuts sign is going to get your attention because they're food oriented, right? Their body wants them, is making them hungry and makes them seek out food stimuli. What people find is that really rapidly on these drugs, that much of that food noise goes away, right? And that they can concentrate in ways that they were not able to before, right? Now free, right, from all of that food noise. So I think there's people, again, whose quality of life goes up that is not just directly about the weight loss, right? It is about having more control over these other things that are part of their lives.
Diet, exercise, good sleep, everyday habits that are catered to that person's specific circumstances. Is that objectively a better approach than using a GLP-1 drug?
Well, look, if you can achieve those kinds of health gains independent of using this drug, no drug comes with zero risk.
Right. Okay.
Right? If you can achieve that without using the drug, more power to you, right? But what we know is that the vast majority of folks will not achieve that, right? And that they are going to need some help from the biology, right, in order to both lose the weight and keep it off over the long run. Again, when you talk to most individuals with obesity, they've lost a lot of weight, right? They have just gained it back, right? And that's, again, a biological response. And what these drugs do is prevent that biological response to the weight loss.
That's Randy Seeley, the director of the Michigan Nutrition Obesity Research Center at the University of Michigan, speaking with Carrie Jr. II about GLP-1 medications. When we return, we will continue this conversation, learning a little more about GLP-1 medications and combating obesity. You all stay right there. We'll be right back. This is The Metro. listening to The Metro on 1019 WDET. I'm Tia Graham. The GLP-1 weight loss drug is in high demand. We're discussing the impacts the drug has had on people's lives, how its rise in popularity shapes how we view bigger bodies. Randy Seeley is the director of the Michigan Nutrition Obesity Research Center at the University of Michigan. He is also a paid consultant to drug companies like Lilly and Novo, which manufacture drugs like Zepbound, Mounjaro, and Ozempic. Here's that conversation with the Metro's Carrie Jr. II.
Okay, so I want to talk about the perceptions around the people who take the drug. Tennis superstar Serena Williams revealed last year that she turned to GLP-1 drugs after struggling to shed postpartum weight. Since her commercials for the telehealth company Ro aired, she has been criticized for promoting the drug. I think Serena is just an example, but how generally has the public responded to people who do use GLP-1s? What are your thoughts on this?
Being in this field for a long time, we could see this day coming, right? That this was going to happen in terms of that we were going to have these effective medicines. And I have to admit, I was pretty naive. I believed, right, that when people saw that these medicines worked, that people would come to understand, right, that obesity is a medical problem that has to do with your biology and not your willpower. I don't think anybody thinks that Serena Williams is lazy, right? And so the fact that she couldn't lose that weight, I think shows you, right, that this is part of a biological system. What you weigh is not just about the choices that you make. It is about the biology, right? And the environment that we live in that we can't change. And so the question is, like, are we going to let people use these effective therapies, right, to fight it? Again, for me, it should show you that it's a biological problem. But the reality is the backlash that you're identifying here with Serena Williams has been very strong. The term Ozempic face gets tossed around a lot. And again, from my point of view, that is whether they intend to or not, it is body shaming, right? You are shaming people that somehow their body has changed by the use of these drugs. And therefore, again, the way they accomplish it is just simply isn't the way it should be done. You should do what I did. So much of what you see in social media, right, is if you do what I did, right, you would lose that weight, you would keep it off, you would have big muscles, you would be super healthy. But what we know from data, right, is that almost all dietary regimens work for somebody and no dietary regimen works for everybody, right? So the belief, right, of these individuals, if you just do what I do, right, you would be healthy like me, just isn't true. I mean, one of the things that we have to all appreciate, right, is that lean people want to take credit for being lean, right? We would, whether they think of it consciously or not, right, they want to believe that it's because of their good decisions, their hard work, that's why they're there. Again, it is not just about that, right? It has a lot to do about what the biology you bring and the genetics. So again, we should be have more grace about people trying to deal with their weight and whether they choose to act in the way by using these drugs or choose not to, right? That we should give them some grace about those choices.
Is there a reality where there are people who take these drugs who want to drop a few pounds and not just someone who's really trying to manage their weight and their health?
I know people, I have people in my life who have told me that they are using these drugs where they clearly didn't fit any criteria for the use of these drugs and did so in a way that had some vanity to it, right? They wanted to fit into this clothing. They wanted to be ready for this event. I do know people who use these drugs that way. I just do not have moral outrage about it, right? Like, again, it's a decision they have made with their physician to do that. What we have to decide is who should we pay for, right? That is, who are we going to help, right, to afford these drugs, either through your insurance or through some government program. And that's a much harder decision, right, about what the value of these drugs are.
I don't know if the question is whether we should be talking about it, if it's how do we talk about it. But the idea that these drugs are now available, does it perpetuate an idea that thinner is better?
There are things that everybody can do, right, to be healthier at whatever weight they are. What they can't do is just simply choose to lose weight, right? So again, eating better and moving, right? Those are things that are healthy and help promote a healthier body independent of whether they lead you to weight loss, right? So one of the things about these drugs, right, is, again, it makes it easier to lose weight, and it has health benefits that are not even only attributable to the weight loss. So even individuals who don't lose much weight on these drugs still have improvements in their cardiovascular risk. So again, it's a complicated set of issues around how does we judge people, right? And all of this is the goal to make them healthier. But with the use of these drugs, there's no question, right, that some people are now even more judgmental about individuals with obesity because they don't fit the body type. And look, you could do this thing now, right, in order to get there. Why aren't you? Again, maybe they are, right? And that within the confines of the drugs, this is what they've been able to achieve. So I think that gets back to this issue about what's happening on a society. And I think what you find out, right, is that individuals with obesity are always on the double-edged sword, right? Like, and damned if you do and damned if you don't.
It sounds like what you're saying is solving that issue is separate from determining whether or not these drugs are or should be accessible to people. That is a societal perception that will happen regardless of whether they're taking the drug or not. And even when they are, you're saying, and they are being healthier, it may not even result in a noticeable physical change.
Correct.
Could this, of course, make people reliant on it, as in, they're only going to be small or thin for as long as they're on the drug, and if they ever get off of it, they're going to gain the weight back, so they're going to have to be taking GLP-1s for the rest of their life?
So I'll flip that around, right? So if you had high blood pressure, right? You wander into your doctor's office, doctor talked to you a little bit about trying to reduce the salt in your diet. Great, right? You did that, didn't help, right? So what do? They put you on a drug, right? Is there any expectation, right, that when that blood pressure goes down, right, we get you to goal, right, that you should be able to stop taking the drug and keep your blood pressure low? No, that sounds ridiculous, right? That's essentially what we're talking about here, right? It is not any different than other chronic conditions. Diabetes, right? We don't expect patients who have type 1 diabetes, are they reliant on insulin? Yeah, they are. Is that something that's wrong? No, it's great that we have insulin to give them, right? So chronic conditions are going to be treated chronically. And it may be that you're not taking these drugs for the rest of your life, but what should be true, right, is that we shouldn't have patients and randomly pull them off the drugs with the hope that they will still be able to maintain the health improvements. One of the things we know, right, is that coming down the pike, right, are drugs that are probably dosed once a month rather than once a week. So we're going to have other options for patients as we go forward that may, again, mean they're not taking this drug for the rest of their life. But an individual, again, when we lowered your blood pressure, you are still a patient with high blood pressure. It's just well treated. And that's the same that goes, right, for obesity.
You're listening to The Metro on 1019 WDET Detroit Public Radio. I'm Kerry Jr. II. My guest is Randy Seeley. He is the director of the Michigan Nutrition Obesity Research Center at the University of Michigan. He's also a consultant to the pharmaceutical companies Lilly and Novo. And we're talking about the GLP-1 drugs, their impact, and why they're so popular nowadays. So, Professor Seeley, there are drug manufacturers that are selling alternative GLP-1s that have not been approved by the FDA. How does that happen? And can you break this down for us? What do people really need to know?
Yeah. I think one of the things to understand is this isn't a new phenomenon, right? There have been companies trying to take advantage of individuals' desire to lose weight in all sorts of ways with ineffective measures, right? So you can see large amounts of the supplement industry, right, promising weight loss. So what's true about now is that the compounding pharmacies that are delivering GLP-1 drugs, right, some are doing a reasonable job of it, and that those are really effective medications. So the compounding pharmacies got involved because when the FDA says something is scarce, that allows compounding pharmacies to now make it. And that was not designed for this situation. That was designed for when cocktails of cancer drugs, right, or anesthetics or pain medications, right, were not available, right, that these compounding pharmacies could step in and fill that gap. Now what you see, right, are large companies using compounding pharmacies and telemedicine, right, to try to deliver these compounds at a cheaper price. The concern always, right, is that it's not getting nearly as much oversight from the FDA about the production. Making these compounds is not trivial. And so the question becomes, are you getting in that jar what you're supposed to get? And the FDA has found all sorts of circumstances where people have had harm from using compounded drugs. Some of that is because what's in the jar is not what it's supposed to be. But some of it's also that people now have to self-dose, right? And that they misdose themselves, right? Because rather than it being in a pen where the dose is already fixed, right, they are having to do other kinds of things. I know patients who go onto research websites and start ordering unapproved drugs. So retatrutide is a drug that's in phase 3 trials from Lilly that again look positive. People are going and buying it before it is approved by the FDA and before it's available from Lilly and buying it on research websites. I can tell you, we buy peptides on research websites. We test every single batch, right, to make sure it is what it's supposed to be. And many times it is not what it is supposed to be. So this is definitely a buyer beware sort of circumstance when you're using these other kinds of avenues. The ones that are legal and that you can buy above board are going away and probably are going to continue to go away. And the reason it's going away, right, is because these drugs are no longer scarce.
There are so many societal factors like income, geography, predetermine whether someone will be successful implementing the lifestyle plan. Can you just kind of talk about all of the different ways, access
to healthy foods, right? So we talk about food deserts all the time, right? And those food deserts are real, right? It is very, you have to go much farther to find healthier options depending on where you live. Just as a simple example, right? So if you took a tin of raspberries, right, and compared to how much it costs per calorie compared to raspberry jam, it's 20-fold more expensive per calorie to eat the raspberries. So we would tell everybody, you should eat the raspberries and not the sugar-laden jam. But it's 20-fold more expensive, right? Like, we have to put in context, right, what we're asking people to do. We don't, when you actually start doing the math, and you actually, again, all the latest versions as we're trying to change nutrition advice in this country, I'm going to leave that issue aside. But the way we've talked about people trying to eat healthier, we don't have enough arid land to have that many vegetables, right? Like there isn't a path from here to there, right? That if we just made the decision today that everybody would eat a lot more green leafy vegetables, we don't have a way to produce enough of them, right? It's one of the interesting things. Let me take you on this little aside because I think the audience will find it interesting. We are currently feeding 8 billion people on the planet. Okay. Now, again, hunger and starvation happens, but it's mostly a political issue. It's not that we don't have enough food, right? That is an amazing feat of the human condition, right? When I was growing up, right, and we only had 3 billion people on the planet, there was great deal of worry, right, that we would never be able to feed the next billion, let alone get to 8 billion people that we're feeding. To do so, we had to industrialize the food supply. When we industrialize the food supply, there's no doubt, right, that we've probably done some harm along the way as well, right? But we can't just undo, right, the industrialization of the food supply, right? Because then we couldn't feed everybody. So the question is,
the harm you mean is like the processing and the things that we feed into the crops to make them grow, to make more food.
Exactly. Right. All of the things, the pesticides, the modern farming techniques, all of that. Again, also how you transport the food. What is the critical factor? Again, it's probably a lot of different things that we've done to the food supply. But the notion that we can just undo it, we can just make a conscious choice to undo it, just simply isn't realistic. Right? So now, again, that's the position we're in. How do we help people be healthy within the constraints of which of the world that we live in? Some of those constraints are financial, some of them are social, some are the limits of the sociology, right, of humans to help other humans. So I see the fact that we're using these drugs as a net benefit, right, and that it is giving people options that they didn't have before.
What do you say to the people who say, well, you're just trying to sell me another drug that I have to now pay for because you're making money for the drug companies?
Yeah. So again, apropos, right? I am a paid consultant for both Novo and Lilly, right? People can use that information and judge how they want. But they didn't make the crisis, right? They aren't food companies, right? They didn't make this crisis. What they did is respond to the fact that it was an unmet medical need. Right? And they produced effective medicines. And you can decide, like, how much do they deserve to get paid for those medicines? That is a really deep, difficult issue. What is the value of those medicines, and how do you prove what that value is? I don't have any answers to that. I don't pretend to be an expert on it. But the notion that they haven't produced something that is useful, right, for a wide range of people, again, I think flies in the face of the evidence. Now, again, what do you want to do? I'm all for prevention, right? We should try to work on the food supply in a way but the idea that we know we just did these 3 simple things, right, that we would lower the rates of obesity, that's just not true, right? And lots of people want to sell you the idea, right, that I know the thing that nobody is telling you, right, about how it is that we could undo these things. And it's just simply not true. And again, the raspberries versus the raspberry jam is the ultimate example of that.
All right. Professor Seeley, I appreciate your time. Is there anything I may have missed in this conversation? I know we went through a lot. I just want to tie the bow on this here. Something that's important for listeners to know.
I think the most important thing to understand, right, is that your weight is not under your conscious control, right? We mix it up because it does involve a behavior, right? Eating, right? And everybody has a strong relationship to food in their life, right? You're eating multiple times a day. It has cultural significance for you, but that doesn't mean that you understand exactly how your body is doing this, right? And that biology, right, is the part that we need to pick apart in order to be able to give people tools, right, to be able to lose weight easier, right? When they don't have to fight the biology, right, they can lose weight, make better choices, move around more.
Randy Seeley is the director of the Michigan Nutrition Obesity Research Center at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. He is also a paid consultant to drug companies like Lilly and Novo, which manufacture drugs like Zepbound, Mounjaro, and Ozempic. He spoke with the Metro's Carey Jr. II. Coming up, body image in the age of GLP-1s. We'll learn more. You all stay right there. We'll be right back. This is the Metro. It's the Metro on 1019 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham. Now, GLP-1 medications are popular nowadays, as we've heard. American culture and its overall idea of what a body should look like has been under a microscope for years. And it's not new that pharmaceuticals are being promoted for weight loss. Since as early as the 1930s, the promotion of weight loss medications have been widely available. And as time has progressed, so has the science behind weight loss. GLP-1 medications were first approved for type 2 diabetes treatment in 2005, and now they are widely available to the masses. So just how impactful has the drug been for people who struggle with high weight? And how does our swift adoption of a weight loss drug impact body image? And what does it say about what we value? Dr. Kendron Sonneville is an associate professor and chair of nutritional sciences at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. And Dr. Sonneville joins me now to talk a little bit more about how GLP-1 medications are changing the way we discuss body image. Dr. Sonneville, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Of course. So Doctor, let's begin. How are body image and mental health connected?
The body image and mental health are profoundly connected. The way that we feel about our bodies affects a range of health behaviors, including those that we know are linked to stress and stress management. People with negative body image have lower self-esteem overall, are more likely to have depressive symptoms, more likely to experience anxiety, and are far more likely to develop eating disorders or develop worse eating disorders. And so body image is really sort of at the core of an opportunity to prevent mental health concerns. And that is, for me, as someone who works in public health, something I think about a lot of how can we help people have better body image, so they're less likely to encounter all these other mental health effects.
And what influences body image? Where do we get some of our ideas about ourselves and the way that we view ourselves?
Great question. So in the field, we tend to think of three primary factors that shape how we feel about ourselves and how we think bodies should look, right? Where we get these messages about body ideals or sort of aspirations. These three kind of pathways are peers, and we think a lot about some of these ideas coming through in early childhood, and so that's why peers is really important. Parents, another really important messenger, and then the big one is media, and media is becoming an increasingly pernicious and toxic way that we're getting messages about body ideals.
And we're definitely going to get into media, especially social media and its impact in the world, excuse me, of GLP-1 medications. But before we get down to that, I do want to just talk about that, weight changes and how weight changes can bring unexpected emotions for when you both are losing weight and gaining weight, because body image is a spectrum. So how can this create anxiety for an individual, and how does it present itself?
Yeah, I think that we are wired to believe that there is a sort of a right way to look, and a lot of that is really tied to body size. And when people's bodies change, it is something that is visible. People notice, and in our society, people comment on weight changes. And even if the weight change is in the direction towards a body ideal, usually sort of weight loss comes with a lot of celebration and positive comments that is still sending this message that your worth and your value is tied to the way that your body looks. And it leaves people living in fear of, what if this is temporary? Because often weight loss is, particularly through behavioral means, is temporary. And it's just sort of reminding people that they are being judged by the way they look and by their body size. And those are really kind of fickle metrics. And it keeps us worried. It keeps us obsessed. It keeps us sort of invested in this sort of project of controlling the way our bodies look.
And Dr. Sonneville, moving into GLP-1 medications in the culture right now, it is taking over social media feeds with ads and commentary and just so many think pieces right now. There are terms now used online that are associated with the use of these medications, one of them being Ozempic face, as we heard a little bit earlier. Are you concerned about social media influencing people's decisions?
I'm concerned about social media in so many ways. One, in terms of influencing people's decisions, because medications, just like any intervention, medications come with a series of risks and benefits. And I think social media portrayals of medications and kind of the implications of taking a medicine that you would likely need to be on for life, those messages don't capture the nuance that comes with a decision like that. It also makes medication seem like an easy choice, and that in that way it sort of stigmatizes people who do take the medication. So there's just so many ways in which these sort of simplified kind of sound bites that come with social media promotion of a medication really don't do this topic justice. These are conversations that are, whether or not someone initiates a medication, that are deeply personal, that should be done recognizing the risks and potential harms in consultation with a medical team and others. And we should not be relying on social media, obviously, for medical advice, but the images are too alluring, right? This idea of being able to change one's body quickly. People are desperate for that because of societal message that are deeply internalized and deeply ingrained about the value of thinness.
We're talking about body image in the age of GLP-1 medications. Our guest is Dr. Kendrin Sonneville, an associate professor of nutritional science at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Now, I want to play a clip that highlights the role celebrities are playing right now in promoting GLP-1 medications. Here is a clip of tennis legend Serena Williams.
Mm-hmm. I'm on Roe, 34 pounds down on GLP-1s. Healthier on Roe. Supported on Roe. FDA-approved GLP-1 options. Now even in a pill. Weight loss expertise I trust. I'm moving better on Row. I'm feeling better on Row. I'm Serena Williams. This is me on Row.
So, in your opinion, what does it say when we see celebrities such as Serena Williams, who for years has been body goals for so many people? You know, when we see something like this and we see it from someone like a Serena Williams, what does it say about the drug and the uses of this drug?
Yeah, so I have a lot of kind of complicated feelings related to kind of this commercial, and I certainly support Serena Williams' decision to make an informed choice for herself and support her bodily autonomy and sort of and why she opted into this medication. But my heart hurts for young girls that have bodies that are underrepresented in spaces like tennis, or underrepresented in many spaces, because, you know, I think implicit in this ad is that her body was less than when it was somewhat larger than it is in these commercials. And I think, you know, she is a legend and is a role model for so many. And I think it really complicates this role model status where there's this asterisk of, I was great, I've achieved something that no woman in tennis has ever achieved, as a not super thin white person, which is what sort of the, you know, kind of history of that sport has looked like, but with this asterisk of, but now that I'm smaller, I've unlocked something else. And I think that is a really, I think it's a shame, right, that is sort of part of that legacy. But again, it is not sort of shame or judgment to her on wanting a medication or utilizing a medical treatment that is now available and effective. It is about the kind of the branding and the messaging it sends sort of more broadly, particularly youth that look up to someone like her.
And Dr. Sonneville, is there a risk that these medications reinforce the idea that thinner is better?
For sure, right. There is, we are not anywhere in a shortage of messages around us that that thinner is better. That is the predominant body ideal that we are fed every minute. These medications sort of subtly reinforce that and also present it as something that is more available to people than ever before. And it really allows people to sort of bypass the hard work of sort of challenging beauty ideals and doing the deeper work of self-acceptance to say, like, I'm struggling with my body. Perhaps my body is not the problem. Perhaps societal ideals are the problem. And having a medication that is as readily available as it is now allows people to say thinner is better, and here I am able to be thinner now. And the truth is, for some people, being in a thinner body does not come with improved health. It comes with much worse health. And so this sort of knee-jerk reaction of assuming fatter is worse and thinner is better harms people, right? For some people, weight loss comes with some health improvement, but for other folks, weight loss comes with deteriorating health.
Not too long ago, there was a push to expand our idea of what a body images are, body positivity, that whole movement that we were having. We were talking just a little bit about that. So in what ways are we seeing, you know, the body positivity movement or just the way that we view our bodies right now connected to the GLP-1 craze that we're seeing right now?
Yeah, the body positivity space has this has complicated it for sure. I, first worked in the topic or the space of body positivity early in my career. I'm a registered dietitian by training and worked with young people who had eating disorders at an eating disorder clinic at Boston Children's Hospital at the same time as I was working with some higher weight youth in another clinic at the same hospital. And what I was so struck by is a sort of shared experience of body hatred, and it's occurring sort of across the spectrum of body sizes, that kids are suffering so much at the hands of their relationship with food and their bodies. And in that time, we could really think about this sort of unifying message that no matter what your body looks like, it is not good for your health to hate your body, right? Because you sort of suffer, you are spending a lot of time and money and energy, and it's a major distraction away from life when one is hating their body. It was really straightforward to promote this message because weight change wasn't readily available to most people, right? Statistically, most people weren't going to be able to lose significant amounts of weight. And so it was easy to say, focus on how you're thinking about your body rather than trying to change your body. And that is what's really different in this moment, is that people are able to access this medication that, again, allows them to change their body and sort of bypass this sort of work of body positivity. But just because weight loss is now more possible for people, it doesn't really get at what was sort of the core of the body positivity movement. It's not that, well, you can't change your weight, so just accept what you have. It was sort of recognizing that there was a lot of harm coming to people because of the way they judge their own bodies and the way that others judge their bodies. And it's sort of a part of a bigger pattern of how we treat larger bodies in this society. Yeah. And it was sort of an offshoot, or sort of the kind of superficial sort of top layer of a larger movement addressing anti-fat bias, where we are treating, or people in larger bodies are facing unequal treatment across every domain, within education, within friendships, within healthcare, and that it's not about loving your body. It's about really thinking about our society and how we are treating larger people, and recognizing that people of all body sizes deserve to be treated with dignity, respect. They should have rights to informed consent, bodily autonomy, accommodation, all these things that body positivity maybe didn't sort of present kind of this the full picture, but that's really what inspired this movement, is that we are not treating ourselves and others well based on assumptions related to body size.
And Dr. Sonneville, listening to you talk about body positivity, the movement, and what it really stood for, if you could reset the cultural conversation around bodies and health, what would you change?
Oh, God. That's a tough question. I mean, what I would, a simple answer to the most impossible question is, I think, recognizing, or maybe sort of thinking instead of the term body positivity, sometimes people use the word body neutrality. I like to think of self-acceptance or body acceptance. It is about not having your body be central in how you view yourself, whether you're very positive about your body or ambivalent about it or feel really negatively about it. The body should not be central to your self-worth, because this is setting us up for a lifetime where the reality is our bodies will change with aging, with illness, with pregnancy, with disability, with stress, with life transitions. Like, we have to be able to endure a changing physical self. And as much as we tie our worth to sort of this outward appearance, this is likely to be something we struggle with across our lives, across our life stages, and to really put more of a focus on what are the other ways that we judge ourselves, value ourselves, the way that we assign worth, that is not going to be as susceptible to sort of natural changes as one's appearance is.
Dr. Kendrin Sonneville is an associate professor of nutritional science at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Dr. Sonneville, thank you so much for joining the Metro and further discussing body image in the age of GLP-1s.
You're welcome. It was great to be here.
The Metro is produced by Sam Corey, Carey Jr. II, Robin Vincent, and me, Tia Graham. Our engineers are Nate Bender and Jose Yanis, and music's done by Sam Bobian. Our senior producer is David Lyons, and The Metro is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. You all have a great day.